Alrighty guys, welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about why sympathetic activity, or our fight and flight response, or our adrenaline and epinephrine, same thing, or noradrenaline and norepinephrine signaling, when heightened, can actually delay recovery from exercise. Now, when we think about how this works, when we exercise, we have our sympathetic activity being activated. So we have, increased adrenaline or epinephrine signaling in the body. We can also have some increases in cortisol, which essentially help the heart rate to increase, help the blood pressure to increase, and we can do our activity or our exercise. This can stay elevated for some time post-exercise, but then generally comes down and we reach a more parasympathetic state, whereby we can essentially start to recover some, or to repair some of the damages which have been done. There was a interesting study done which looked at, I think it was on mice, but essentially looked at the effects of increased stressful stimuli in the periods, or the periods after exercise, and found that when we have exposure to increased stressful stimuli, regardless of whether that was physical, so it can just be mental or psychological stress, it actually inhibited our capacity to, or the capacity to, repair muscle damage and prolonged muscular pain. So I guess the conclusion was that, the increased activation of what's called the beta adrenergic receptors, which are our receptors which bind adrenaline or bind epinephrine, continuous activation of these receptors essentially delays or inhibits our capacity to, or hinders, I should say, our capacity to really recover, repair inflammation, and also, generally recover from muscle pain or muscle damage induced by exercise. So what does this mean for anyone who is exercising frequently, who's an athlete, or who generally wants to, try and avoid some of the, or finds themselves getting increasingly sore from exercise? Well, of course, there's a lot of processes that go into exercise recovery, but one of the things that's very important is that you're not continuously having a stressful response or activating your stress response. Now, obviously, cortisol comes into this as well. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It's very similar, but we're looking or focusing on just acute stresses, which aren't necessarily, enough to rise cortisol up too much. But essentially, these might be us psychological stresses or whatnot. So, for example, practical implication of this: you exercise in the morning, you induce a lot of muscle damage, which then will be repaired during the day, during the night, into the next day. But then you go to work all day and you're very highly stressed, and you come home and you have family stresses or financial stresses. Well, realize that these are going to directly inhibit your capacity to recover from the exercise. So obviously a lot of these things can't necessarily be avoided, but the practical implication of this is doing our best to mitigate some of these stresses to the point in which we can engage more parasympathetic, or that rest and digest state. And I have heard of a practice whereby people, or bodybuilders, for example, will take a beta blocker after training to induce or to get into a parasympathetic state quicker. And from their experience, they have reported that, or anecdotally, they've reported that, it's allowed them to recover quicker from exercise. I wouldn't necessarily encourage this to the general population, because there aren't a whole lot of studies looking at this in particular. But what you can think about is, like, why might that be helping? Well, it's essentially blocking some of the negative stressful stimuli that result from increased adrenaline and epinephrine. So therefore, if they can block that or get into a parasympathetic state quicker, it's going to allow the process of recovery, of the muscle damage recovery, etc., to occur faster. So we can use the theory of that for a general application of, what are some things you can do to, get into a parasympathetic state and minimize the sympathetic or stressful stimuli that inhibit muscle recovery. So Again, like we said, it can't always be avoided, but what can you do? Things such as mindfulness meditation have been found to help us to get into a more parasympathetic state. Breath work exercises can be very beneficial for some people. Obviously, it's going to be individual, not everyone's the same. Looking at minimizing stressful things such as unhealthy food, which your body, generally won't have as good a response to. Cleaning up the diet, putting the right food in your body, which is going to be the least amount of stress for your body to digest, etc. What else is there? Mitigating or addressing things that inhibit sleep. So if you have sleep apnea, getting that fixed, that's going to really bump up your sympathetic signaling because you're basically stopping breathing during the night. So things like that, get on top of those. Doing activities which mentally aren't stressful but you enjoy can help you to relax. And then as well, we also want to think about stimulant intake, and a lot of people will take stimulants before they exercise. But this is one of the reasons, or like a very good reason, as to why you should probably avoid stimulants as much as you can after exercise, because you really are just jacking up the, adrenaline, epinephrine response and kind of inhibiting the capacity of your body to switch more into that parasympathetic state. So by taking stimulants after you exercise, it's very counterproductive to, really muscle recovery, etc. So think about minimizing stimulants after exercise, and particularly later in the day as well, because they're going to affect your sleep. So there's a few things that you can think about, but definitely, an important, thing to consider when we're looking at our recovery from exercise. If you're doing a lot of exercise, etc., and you want to try and reduce some of the muscle pain, do your best and look at ways in which you can get into more of a parasympathetic state, because that's going to be more conducive to, starting those repair processes and allowing you to return to the sporting field or the gym or whatever it is sooner than otherwise, particularly sooner than someone else who has a lot of psychological stress. So hope that was interesting, guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.